Call the February 24th regular meeting of the Jersey Shore Area School District to order. Roll call, please, Mr. Anders.
Mr. Becker.
Here.
Mr. Brungard.
Here.
Mrs. Dobler.
Here.
Mrs. Grant.
Here.
Mr. Kinley.
Here.
Mrs. Petrowski.
Here.
Mrs. Stemler.
Here.
Mrs. Thomas.
Here.
Mr. Allen.
Here.
All 9 members present.
At this time, Mr. Armbruster is going to come up. He has some people to introduce.
Good evening, board. Tonight we have 3 students that are going to be joining us from the middle school for the pledge. Unfortunately, one of the students is not able to make it this evening, but Olivia Wright, Kaylee Newman, and Jocelyn McCracken worked together on developing a passion project throughout our Come Alive time. They met with Mr. Valdus and myself occasionally to set up a project where they were going to raise funds for the American Cancer Society. And so they planned it through the Come Alive period, and they executed over the course of 2 weeks where they had a half-court shot competition. They came down each day, led the school in the morning announcements, and talked a little bit about the American Cancer Society, and then they held the half-court shot during that morning time from 7:45 to 8:25. So in total, they managed to raise $540 for the American Cancer Society. And we will also have Adeline Bauer with us tonight. Her current passion project is to raise funds for and donations for the SPCA. So Adeline is currently coming down in the mornings and giving announcements to our students. And so her passion project that she developed through Come Alive is going to go for the next 2 weeks. So at this time, I believe we have Olivia Wright, Kaylee Newman, and Adeline Bauer to come on up and lead us in the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ladies, if you would come up here, please. Olivia, here's a pen and a certificate. Thank you for doing that for us tonight. We really appreciate it. If you wouldn't go anywhere, because I think parents want pictures and stuff too. So, Adeline, I know you love your picture taking, so this one's for you as well.
Thank you.
This one is for you. And if you guys would turn around so your parents and Mr. Armbruster can get pictures, that's the only way it ends up on our internet page. Adeline, we'll make sure that gets front and center on the website.
Okay. As Mr. Francis has pointed out several times, and actually we've talked about this as a board, we did a reorganization as we're required by law during the first week of December. And at that time, we only had 8 members, and it ended up being a 4-4 tie, which ends up being status quo, because if you can't reorganize and change the organization, you maintain it as is. So for this evening, we've scheduled another reorganization. Now that we have all 9 members, and we want to get a few of the meetings kind of behind ourselves to start the year, and then go ahead and schedule this reorganization again. So at this point, do I have a motion to, because this is out of cycle, I'd like to get a motion to go ahead and move forward with the reorganization. Do I have a motion?
I will.
And a second?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion on the reappointment process? Any discussion on the reappointment process? Any questions? Hearing none, all in favor of going through with another reorganization, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. And at this time, I'll turn the chair over to Mr. Brungard, and he'll act as pro tem. The two that were on to be reorganized, I guess, tonight, were just the president and the vice president. The assistant board secretary, Mrs. Stobler, has asked to open that one up as well, and she's going to decline from
Yes.
being eligible for that, to be reassigned to that post. So we'll be doing all three rather than just the two. So, Mr. Brungard.
Okay, at this time, I guess I'll open up the floor for nominations for president of the board. Have any nominations?
I would like to nominate Mrs. Thomas.
Mrs. Thomas? Nothing on this. Okay, Mrs. Thomas, do we have any other nominations?
I'd like to nominate Craig Allen for president.
Okay, Mr. Allen. Any other nominations? Have a motion to move that nominations for president be closed?
So moved, and I'd also like to strike my name. I think it's fine as it is.
I'm sorry, Mary, I didn't hear what you said.
I said so moved, but I also like to take my name off this list because I'm fine the way we are.
She's declining. She's declining.
You're declining board presidency
The nomination.
nomination. Okay, so that leaves with Mr. Allen. Do we have any other ones? Do you have a motion to close nominations?
I did make a motion to close
You
nominations.
did?
You just need a second.
Need a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
With that roll call or not?
And then, Mr. Allen, you'll take care of the vice president and secretary.
Not make a, even though we had a nomination, there was only one, I still want to do a vote, and a motion to appoint Mr. Allen, and then a second.
Okay, you need a motion, I guess, to appoint Mr. Allen as board president. Have a motion for that?
Motion.
You have a second?
Second.
Okay, you have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Please,
Two?
please speak out if you.
No, right now I am as well.
I oppose.
Four.
Three?
Four.
Four?
One, two, no, three. It's three. One, two, three.
Voted?
It's already voted. It's-
That's it, and then Mr. Allen will take care of the rest of it then.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and we'll open nominations for vice president.
I would like to nominate Mary Thomas for vice president.
I'll second that.
Is there any other nominations? If there's not going to be any other
Are
nominations.
there any
you
other
just-
nominations?
You just go straight to the motion and a second to appoint me.
Okay. We have a motion and a second to appoint Mrs. Thomas as vice president.
Was a motion in a second, wasn't it?
Because there was only a single nomination. Just move it directly.
Need another motion? So moved.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. And with Mrs. Dover declining to maintain her position as Assistant Board Secretary, we'll move on to nominations for Assistant Board Secretary.
I would like to nominate Angela Bria.
Okay.
Second.
Any other nominations? Okay, hearing none, we have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Okay, at that point, we'll move to close all reorganization. Okay, the next section, minutes, approval of minutes A through F, and combination of minutes and disciplinary hearing adjudications. Any questions? If you have any questions on the disciplinary hearing, we would have to go into executive session to discuss those.
I have one thing on the January 6 minutes. There's a typo in my name. They forgot the ER. Other than that,
Okay. Anybody else? We changed the motion to as amended for these, for the January 6th.
There was one other typo on the, the
January 6
Capital project.
capital projects.
January 13th, there was a typo on,
Other than that, it's
these are 6th or 13th, Mrs. Dover.
13th, I think.
Okay. On 13th, letter D, the very bottom of that section, there was a doubling up of the words. The vote was unanimous vote, yes, motion carried, that needs to be striked from the minutes. Page.
Has there been any motion yet?
Uh,
Motion?
Mr. Becker made the primary motion. Are you going to amend that to as amended?
as amended.
Okay, thank you.
Second.
Any further discussion? Okay, hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Treasurer's report. We have the January 2020 Treasurer's report and the January 2020 investment report. A motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any other discussion or questions?
Just a comment on the investment report. Can you just give us a quick rundown on what's happening there?
Yes, we did a solicitation for interest rates on January the 27th. Found three different CDs, well actually technically it's 4 CDs that we purchased from Muncie Bank and Trust. So we invested $4 million with Muncie Bank and Trust, 3-month, maturing in April, June, and July. So those were some money we invested just to get higher interest rates.
What were the rates?
1.78.
So it's part of the general budget for the year, it's just that you're doing short-term investments in order to generate some money.
Yep.
Well, a little bit, okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions?
So, I do have a question. So, the money you're investing, like when it takes that money from the general fund, right? Basically? And
It
so does.
essentially is our general fund.
Oh, it's all in the general fund?
Yeah, it's just a matter of where it sits. So if you have a couple different checking accounts, maybe one pays more than the other, that's what he's doing. He's
Oh,
putting it in a
okay.
CD that pays more.
So it's
than-
not really getting us below like that amount, the 5% or whatever that we have to keep in our general fund?
No,
No. Okay.
correct me, I'm sorry.
You're
Mr. Rivers.
correct. The 5% rolls on the fund balance.
Okay. So they're considered, the CDs are considered your fund balance too?
CDs are part of the fund balance in the grand scheme of everything. What happens to school districts because of the nature of our funding, we primarily get most of our cash in the beginning part of the year. So we have a huge cash flow at the beginning of the year, and we try to invest that money. And towards the end of the year is when we start utilizing that cash because of the tax revenue coming in August. So we project our cash flow for every month of the year, and we invest money as we feel comfortable in order to make sure we are liquid and can pay our bills, but also gain the most interest for the cash that we have, the cash reserve.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Next item is approval of bills totaling $3,391,964.47. Motion is approved.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion or questions?
I don't really have a question, but I'd like to abstain on that, so how do I do that?
Is there a reason you have to abstain?
Because on the athletic, like my husband was paid as a referee, and I didn't know if I could vote on that.
Okay. Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
I abstained on one that I got paid for something too, so.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. Anything else? Any other questions? Okay. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? And please make sure this is communications. Dr. Davey.
All right. First of all, we do have a special guest here. What makes this guest actually rather special is she's here often, but usually not the one speaking. She's the one working kind of behind the scenes with a lot of kids that you see come here. But she is also our Employee of the Month for January. And you see, like I said, you've seen her here quite a bit, and that's Dolly Oden. So if Dolly would come up. Dolly's very active with our FBLA and is actually the residing FBLA advisor for the state, correct?
Correct.
So she does a lot. I see, would you like to speak on her behalf?
Not probably. She is one of the best teachers up at the high school. She's made such an impact on my life personally. I'm involved so much with FBLA, and I don't know what it would be like without her.
I can't say anything better than that. So.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Should we take a picture so it can go on the internet?
Oh, absolutely. Get back up here a minute.
Thought you were gonna escape.
See, we got people here to keep us in line. That's what that's. Come right up here.
Maybe
Robert.
Maybe Robert should.
Dr. Dady, would you like me to?
Please. a couple of other communications for you guys. I know you had talked to Joe Ham at some point as well. He actually had a conversation with me today regarding use of middle school soccer for the fields next to there and what he would like to do. And we would just need to know who's interested. He's waiting for me to call him back. Is he would like to get a small group of the council members and a small group of the board to kind of work out what that would look like. So I'm not sure exactly who would be interested or available to attend a meeting like that, but he would like to take it to the council, whatever comes out of that meeting in March. I think the first meeting is the 9th. And so that meeting would actually happen soon. How would you like to take care of it?
Any volunteers to?
What is he doing?
He wants to get a group of board members and council members together that basically just sit down and hammer out an arrangement where our middle school soccer players can use the
Pool by the field.
Pool.
I mean, the field.
Oh, okay, because I'm thinking, where are we going that that's not, okay.
For practices only, not for competition.
Okay.
We've used it for practice in the past, and I don't know if you remember, they tried to work something out with us for the pool, an exchange of use for the pool for this, and we've not been able to work something out, and then the pool was down, and then we had nothing to offer at that point, and it's too late in the season for them that they don't want to do any community pool times this year, so he just wants to get people together to work something out so the middle school can utilize that field.
Is there gonna be limitations as far as a board member to what we can give
Well,
or
I don't
take?
think you can have more than 4.
Can't have more than 4, so.
No, I mean, as far as negotiating the terms of what they wanna
Well,
do.
no matter what would happen, it would have to go back to both boards.
Yeah, we're just looking to come to kind of
See if we can
an
get
agreement in
consent.
principle, if you would, of how to offset, things the school can do for the borough versus what, the borough will do for the middle school soccer team.
Is it a certain time of the day that's perhaps planned?
Joe didn't give me any sort of exact time of when they would meet. I think that was somewhat flexible, depending on, I'm gonna call him back with some days and times.
If I'm available, I'm glad I serve on that.
And I don't really know how many I need, as long as I have 1 or 2 or whatever.
Do you want to just get some time from Mr. Ham?
Then I
And
can
then
email you
send
guys
out
and see
an
who's
invitation to the, see who's available. And
Okay.
I would serve on it. I would think that Mary and I would both be important to have on that committee.
All right.
You're talking about Monday, May 9th, or March 9th.
No,
right?
No, that is when the
That's the
council's
next
meeting.
meeting.
That's when it's meeting.
So
Same as
I will set up a date with him probably next week.
Yeah,
Okay.
late this week or early next week, hopefully.
Gotcha.
But to clarify, you're gonna send it out to the board times.
Yep. Then I have to limit it to the first 4.
And soccer practice, I believe, starts the 30th, is that correct?
Of March? Yeah, it's late
Yeah.
March typically when that starts.
So if they could get it approved by the 9th, that would give you plenty of time for the middle schoolers to start planning their practices.
The other thing is on March 23rd is the Advocacy Day down at Harrisburg. And if any of you are interested in going along, just need to kind of, if you want to shoot me an email or whatever, and we can work on arrangements. I just need to kind of let people know when we are coming.
Well, PSAT emailed us on going, but they gave us the option to register ourselves. So I didn't know.
Yeah, that's one that there's no limit on.
Yeah, it
having
doesn't
5
matter how
members
many.
there. Yeah.
But if you would let me know if you're going, please, so even if you registered already online, you guys register yourself. I'm just trying to figure out how many of us are going down. All right? And then finally, just so you're aware, I'll be approving something to go home regarding the census. And just so you're aware that's coming home, and this is kind of for everyone that's watching as well. I met with a census worker that works with the schools because the results of the census has a direct impact on all schools because it has a direct impact on your communities because it does determine like representation and things like that. But the results of the census has a direct impact on like special ed funding and basic ed, all those things. So If, for everyone out there, there is 3 ways to respond to the census. One is online, one is on the phone, and one is through the mail. If you don't want someone to come knocking on your door, there is a time limit there. But most of you will receive it in email. And their stats, what they showed from, is they believe 95% of the households will actually receive their invitation by mail but respond online. Not email, sorry, but through your mail. And there is a date here that I have highlighted. I believe it is March 12th is when an invitation to respond online. And the final reminder postcard will be sent in late April, and after April 27th is when they start sending people out to homes. So if you respond before then no one comes visit your home. All right, so please try to get all that in, because that does have a direct impact on funding for schools, as well as obviously political representation for our area.
So you're sending something home with the kids, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, there's actually a couple parts here. There's a reminder for parents, but there's also a parts that, for example, stats classes and stuff can use, and how that they can utilize the census and resources for, I believe it's middle school and high school specifically, on how the census impacts different areas and the stats that are used to do the census. All the areas that they said impact schools through the census, $675 billion in federal funding is actually influenced by the census, which includes special education, free and reduced lunch, class size reduction, classroom technology, teacher training, after-school programs, and Head Start. And but there is a reminder that goes home with students, and just to help to remind them to get that done so people don't start showing up at their house. All right, just an informational page that kind of looks like this.
Is that on our website or not?
Yeah, we can put it actually on Facebook and our website, just so people are well informed in regards to what's coming and how it's
A lot of
important.
times you're getting these crazy surveys and that doesn't look like it's from the government, Steve.
Agreed. Get a lot of stuff through email especially. So that's just the information on the census. That's all I have for communications.
President's report, I don't have anything this evening. Intermediate unit report.
Let me see here. I did pass out this that they gave us at the IU board meeting to the members. And there was a presentation there on their assistive technology services. And it was really very interesting because there's like a lot of things that they can assist, I think like the life skills or special education. But you know, some of it's very inexpensive, like tips and things that they can assist the teachers with. And their consultative services are free. Like even the one thing just to help a student write, you know, with pencil or pen, you just put like a styrofoam ball on the pen, you know, and it was really neat to see that they can use that, you know. So that's one of the like really inexpensive things. Also, the director of the IU said that, you know, she could come anytime to do a presentation to the board for letting us know about their services. So, and maybe when our agenda's not as huge as it's been lately, you know, and maybe after the budget, we could have her come and give her presentation. And that ends my report.
Thanks, Nancy. Student representative report. Robert, do you have anything for us?
Nothing to report this evening.
Thank you. Superintendent's report.
In your information that was in front of you, there's something from the Pennsylvania College of Technology. And the front page is basically a letter to Mr. Wheeler. This is information just for you to look at. They'd like to make a donation to the manufacturing department regarding some welding equipment, which you'll see on the second page. You will See, I believe the total donation is about $6,000. And this is the equipment that would go towards the classes that Mr. Whelan teaches. There's also a letter on the back from Mr. King. This is informational at this point. The donation won't be on until the next meeting. That way you have time to look it over. Mr. King's at the next meeting, so you'll be able to ask him any questions about it before you vote on it if you want. All right. This is, I will say that this is very beneficial to Mr. Whelan's class. And there are things here that we wouldn't have to buy later, so I fully support this donation because that saves us money in the long run. So that's information for you, but you will see that donation on the next board agenda. One of the things that was asked for at the last meeting was options and what's been done. That paper is also in front of you. Can you switch that over to Apple TV, please? So you all out there can see what I'm talking about here. That way you didn't have to move either. So, if you remember from previous years, we talked about 68 options, I think, total. So rather than going into all of those again, what I did is I laid them out differently for you into 3 categories. Basically, what we believe is complete or substantially complete. I will say, as you look down through those, I'm not going to say that more can't be done in some of those areas. You know, however, in regards to what was discussed at the time, those are the things that we believe were complete or substantially complete. The yellow column is the partially complete.
Ken, before you go on, what's the cutoff on that, the head of the column? Complete plus something, what is it?
It said, I must have accidentally hit a formula, because that is referring to column A3 in the Excel document.
So the complete is the end of the
Yes.
title? Okay.
Complete is supposed to be the end of the title.
Thanks.
So partially complete or still in process, and then not completed, deemed unfeasible, or voted down. So when you look at these, you know, you can ask questions in regards to why not this, or why that, or can be more be done here. That can be a discussion. But the things that have been done, the program cut, those of you that went through the middle school, we talked about like family consumer science. Actually, there used to be family consumer science, business, and tech ed. And they were cut. What was brought back is actually kind of a different program. It more has to do with Future Ready Index and careers, that sort of thing. There were furloughs at the high school. There's not a one-to-one iPad initiative, K-2, and so on. You can see all those green items without reading through them all. I put raise taxes every year. That's been in the done because that has been done for numerous years in a row. So that's why I put it there. I'm not saying taxes have been raised every year since the beginning of time. I'm just saying for quite a few years, yes, that's been done every year. Not necessarily to the index every year, but been raised. Partially done. You see there's actually 2 pages to this. Partially done, that yellow column, you can look down through there. One of the things that was brought up was like a student store, coffee shop. I put it in that partially complete only because that's done, but it's not done to generate funding for the school district. That's done by like our life skills programs at the elementary, middle school, and now high school. And you heard about the high school one recently. There was a limited use of the fitness center. It used to be open for use by people in the morning and afternoon, and now it's just the morning. And sell timber and excess land and explore gas rights. That one's in the yellow because we did sell off timber. We didn't necessarily sell land. We did sell some land over at Avis quite a few years ago. And so all those things in that yellow, again, if there's any that you want me to go into more, I can. The rerouting of buses and consolidate stops. That's something we do every year, but I kind of put it in that yellow column because that's an ongoing process. Last year, we eliminated a bus completely. We're looking at eliminating another one this year, just because of, again, when you're looking at how things are laid out, some kids graduate and you might be able to consolidate some stops and some buses. The not complete or not done or not deemed feasible, those are all things, some of those were voted down. Like you see the closing or consolidating of schools at the bottom of that list, that was voted down. Getting rid of iPad Pros for the teachers, that's actually a lease, so you'd have to wait till that lease is over and then determine whether the buyout's worth going that route or whether we would downgrade those iPads. There's things that just aren't feasible. One of the ideas that was brought forward, and because they were all included on here, we just didn't randomly eliminate. One was utilizing our culinary arts program to feed the kids in the entire district. Well, we can't do that. That's not feasible. We had actually a committee that looked at the 4-day work week, and the cost savings just wasn't there. There were benefits, there were pros and cons to that, but not necessarily financial ones. Some of these overlap, like you'll see on here, eliminate central supply. We don't do that because what we do is actually over in the green column where it says bulk purchasing with other districts. That's part of that central supply is we do bulk purchasing and then house it here so we don't over purchase in those areas. We can see that if you remember far enough back, those of you that have been here a while, we cleaned out supply closets in the individual buildings and ended up throwing a ton of stuff away just because of over purchasing and it wasn't used and it went bad.
Is there a consortium or a group of other districts? Are they OIU districts or?
For supplies? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, we purchase through CSIU, the Keystone Purchasing Network. You'll see those agenda items coming forward in the springtime to finalize the bids.
A question before you go on. The land that we sold out in Avis out there, the gentleman, the buyer was supposed to construct, I believe, 3 or maybe 4 houses. Was that ever completed? Do you know?
I believe they built one. Is that
One?
correct?
I don't know if there's one. The first purchaser was supposed to have built properties by a date specific.
Right.
And that never happened. So we then essentially took the property back and sold it at the appraised value rather than giving the other person a discount. The other person was the Habitat for Humanity, and they just couldn't get all their funds.
So they were taken back by the district and resold.
Right, and then resold at the appraised value. I think that's
Oh,
what.
okay.
That's my recollection.
So is there, and obviously you can ask questions at the next meeting as well, but is there anything I can answer in regarding to what you see on that list now? What I'm going to tell you, my recommendation of what you do with this is, if you remember what we've been talking about, those of you that have been here a while, and those of you that remember the last update to the feasibility study, because the feasibility study hasn't been done since 2010, then there was an update to it a couple years ago that Crabtree did. In that, and we just did a tour of it before the last meeting, in that, the next building that needs a comprehensive renovation is Avis. And before you do that, you typically would do a feasibility study. My recommendation in regards to what you do with this list and what's been done, partially done, not been done, or voted down, before you make too many decisions on that, I would recommend that you actually do a full-blown feasibility study for that entire district, because you would end up doing something similar to that to look at Avis and what the cost of that renovation would be. I would also recommend that if you're concerned about the results you got from Crabtree, then have a different firm do it. And that way, if the results are similar, then that tells you something, and if they're different, then you have different data to work off of. then, because there are other firms out there, whether it be Hunt or whether it be, there's one that's being used in Lycoming County right now, but the name escapes me, but it's a different one than Crabtree. Because you're not required to go with Crabtree or anything like that. So my recommendation, you're gonna have to spend some money to do that, but you're gonna have to do that eventually anyway if you're gonna look at renovating Avis.
For the 2010 that we had Crabtree Group, we actually had several groups come in and present to us what they could provide and at what cost and everything. So we can, you know, if we're concerned about what the Crabtree results were, we could go ahead and just ask the other groups to, or we could ask Crabtree again and include them in the bid process.
You can include them in the bid process, but they wouldn't necessarily be required to go with them, correct? So, if that's the direction you would like to go, I can set up those presentations. Those won't cost us anything. It would just be them coming in, talking about, you know, basically making a presentation on what they would do for us.
How about, what is the thing that's internal we can do? Like, is it facilities or something like that where you can set up a committee of people like to go? Like, don't we have like a policy or something internal?
We have a facilities tour that's a rotating tour of board members.
Like a building, we have the buildings and grounds.
It's like a subcommittee of the capital committee. And they tour one facility, I think, every month, I believe, isn't it, Ben?
What does our policy say though? Isn't there something in our policy about having that updated every so often and like even community members are involved and things like that?
Well, a feasibility study, if we're gonna renovate any of the other schools, will be required anyway, regardless of what we do, you know.
But I mean, internally though, it's not gonna cost us as much money at this point.
But that wouldn't necessarily meet the needs of the state, for us to get funding these bonds.
Plus, we necessarily wouldn't be able to put like what we've done already, we did it with the athletic fields and the sheets that you get when we go through the buildings. What we can't do, the numbers on there are numbers from Crabtree from the update that they did. Well, those are, A, are already 2 years old, and B, we wouldn't be able to give you a real accurate number in regards to what would a renovation of Avis actually cost right now. Because what they would have to go through and do is what all has to be done to Avis, or any building that you do, because we would ask them to do that to the whole district, because what do you have coming shortly after that? According to those, it was, I believe, the high school next and then the middle school. And so if we're looking at those and what needs to be done, because even though the high school and middle school were done more recently, meaning, by more recently meaning the late 90s for the high school and the early 2000s for the middle school, the mechanics in a lot of those buildings weren't done. So it wasn't a full comprehensive renovation. They were more of a facelift type of thing. But except for the addition part of the high school, they added that whole wing and everything in theirs new, that whole E-wing. But not necessarily in the rest of the building. And at the middle school, like you guys just went through, you saw that a lot of the boilers are still original to the building. There's a lot of things that weren't touched, the univents that are in the rooms, things like that. Jersey Shore Elementary was one of them that was actually a comprehensive renovation, except for, as we talked about when we went through there, not all of the kitchen equipment was replaced. They kept what they felt was still feasible. Things like that. Mark, anything else with that?
Question for you. If we send out the feasibility study for bid, are we bound to take the low bid then? Even if it is Crabtree, we can pick?
Professional services, so there's
Okay.
actually no requirement to send it out to bid, but you do to try to
Get the best price.
prices, make a determination of the qualifications of the individuals actually performing the work. And then you can make the decision that you feel on a professional that is best suited to actually make those determinations and conduct that feasibility study for the district.
Okay, thank you.
Why would we do that this year? Couldn't we wait and do it maybe next year to have that done?
Well, no matter, the longer you wait, the longer the shorter time you could have, we're already 2 years into the 5 that it was recommended that we renovate Avis. So even though if you did that this year, what you decide to do with that or when is decisions you would make after you have, because it's gonna take a while for, how long does it take to get a feasibility study done? What did it take the last time?
Probably a solid 9-10 months.
And if you're doing something, if you're dealing with somebody that didn't do it before, they're starting at ground zero.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that that means we have to do it. I'm just saying that would even take.
No, you're
longer.
correct. I mean, obviously, Crabtree might be a little more familiar if similar people, if like Brian and some of those guys that were involved the last time was involved, they might know a little more, but Mary's right. If it's a totally new company, then obviously they're not as familiar with the district and would be, might need a little longer than others might.
What's been the cost in the past, approximately?
That,
Around 20, 25?
I think it was around 20-ish, but and that's, again, that's close to 10 years ago.
And it'll all depend on the scope of the work that you ask them to do as well. So keep that in mind.
you could give them a couple of different options with it. My recommendation is gonna be that if you do it, you have them do it one time for the whole district so you can lay out a plan. If you're gonna look down the road 10, 15, 20 years, which again is what I would recommend that you do because you have other schools other than Avis coming up on the docket, then if you have them do the feasibility study for the entire district, then you can lay out your plan for 20, 25 years down the road of here's the general timeline that we need to follow and where we need to save money or, for which projects, because again, we don't know exactly, even though there's some light at the end of the tunnel, some optimistic rumblings in Harrisburg about PlanCon. We don't know if that's coming back yet, so do we have to fund this ourselves, these renovations, or is PlanCon gonna be there, or what's it gonna look like? And there is some good news coming out of Harrisburg regarding PlanCon, but it's not there yet.
A question Mr. Becker asked before, do we have to take the low bidder?
No.
Did you say you don't? I didn't think we had to, but with Crabtree, with all their experience with the district, I imagine they would probably come in and be the lowest bidder, maybe significantly lower than what the other ones would be. That might influence us. Would be nice to have another architecture firm to actually look at and compare the two, but I wouldn't doubt if they would come in pretty low, being familiar, but that's to see.
And sometimes they come in too low, they've made the same mistake twice.
And
They
I'm
made an
not,
assumption, and they carried that assumption
Right.
over.
Right?
and I'm not sure if we ever had any of them. I don't remember the last feasibility study looking very closely at our athletic complexes. Do you, Mark?
No.
And I think that's something that needs to be included in this because again, that's something that the Capital Projects Committee has looked at as well in regards to what's the state of our athletic facilities and what things need to be done there. I think it needs to be everything.
As far as Crabtree doing the update a couple of years ago, were there issues as far as, what they came up with? Or, I mean, did anybody have concerns about the numbers or the extent of their
It was basically narrowly focused.
narrow focus?
They basically took the 2010 feasibility study and just tried to update some of the information, some of the costs, some of the things like that. But it wasn't a full-blown feasibility study, re-looking at everything and all the conditions of everything. Is that fair, Mark?
Yes.
So, well, I found the policy here on the facilities, but, I mean, the authority on it says the board shall engage in short-term and long-term facilities planning in order to meet the ongoing needs of the district's educational programs and operations. Involvement of the board, staff, community, businesses, and parents/guardians is an important part of this process. So when was the last time that a facility planning was done that included all those people?
And that is different than doing a feasibility study, because the feasibility study is what you need in order to get the costing out, all of that kind of stuff. What you would do is you would take the feasibility study that we would get and do what I just talked about in developing your 15, 20, 25-year plan with that committee after you get the numbers. Okay, here's what it's going to cost us to do each one of these things. Now, let's take that information and what are we going to do from here now that we have this information? What is our 5-year plan, 10-year plan, 15-year plan? And hopefully we know by then whether Plan Con's in place or not. What can we expect in regards to reimbursement from the state? And if not, if we're flipping the bill ourselves, what can we afford to do? What can't, what aren't we going to be able to afford to do? Where do we want to put our resources? You make those decisions after you have that information. That's kind of what I'm saying. With all the things that are up there, it's going to be hard to make some decisions with some of those things without having accurate pricing and stuff in regards to, well, what's it going to cost us to renovate Avis? What's it going to cost us to do the middle school or high school? Obviously using today's pricing, but kind of costing that out over 10, 15, 20 years.
Yeah, and keep in mind that the level of any renovations that we're going to do or remodeling or anything we're going to do at this point is going to take an issuance of bonds. And right now, the interest rate on bonds are the lowest that they've been historically. So if you, sometimes it may not be a perfect time for you, in the big scheme of things, but it may be the best time for you to save money on the interest on the bonds.
Especially if Plan Con kicks in and you can get a great bond rate.
Right.
If Plan Con kicks in and you get a great bond rate, it becomes even more.
Yeah.
So I guess what I'm going to ask you at this point, you want some time to think about it? You want some time for me to bring in before we do anything, bring a couple of these firms in to make a presentation on what they have to offer?
But we want to farm that out to the Capital Projects Committee and Building and Grounds Committees to be the driver behind those interviews with potential feasibility companies.
We could have the firms present just to that group.
And then that group could bring the information forward to the board as a whole. Any thoughts on that?
It's a good idea.
I mean, eventually, we would all have to vote on it to
Right.
take any action on spending any money or anything. But
The board members can attend that too if they want to.
yeah, we've had board members attend that you actually go above the 4 members, but if you're above 4, then those members are just basically audience, but they don't interact in the discussion.
Yeah, there's 3 board members on the committee, and anybody that comes as a board member, which I've done before, is you become part of the audience, but you still hear all the information and you have feedback.
All right, we'll go that direction. We'll give it to the capital projects. And finally, the middle school technology budget presentations. Middle school, you are first.
Mine's off anyway.
Fixed it?
Apparently every time I turn it on, it would.
So, I'm gonna try a new one out. Yeah, they did, thank God. Trade is a little bit. They don't want to take another chance.
May not take that long to tell you on how much better they've gotten at it. No, it's not.
No, you're right about that, some things like that.
Didn't used to do that way.
That's a question.
Before you, there should have been 2 packets of information, one for the middle school, one for the technology group. But they're also the same thing that's in your binders as well, so you can use either one, I just turn them off for you, so you have them in case you don't have your binder. Overview of the middle school budget versus last year's budget. Currently, the middle school budget is below the 1920 budget by about $2,000. I will turn it over to Mr. Valdez, so you can go down through and talk about some of the particulars he's seen, the changes he's done with the middle school budget since he took over at the middle school.
Good evening again. First of all, thanks for coming to the middle school. I thought that was great, and just see what's happening inside the building, at least the physical plan. What you have, I'll just sort of speak off that. Page 1, kind of hit the topics, the major function lines, and then I can break that down for you. But comparing the two budgets, first of all, the 2019-20 budget that we're currently living in is the first budget that I developed for the middle school. Prior 18-19, last year's budget was developed by Mrs. Moore, and then I guess expended it at the transition of the fiscal year. This year, we've developed the budget last year for this year, and I'm just monitoring that to see how things are going, because this is the first budget I guess I created, and actualizing, I think would be the term, and so trying to see how that is working out. The budget we're looking at was developed before I'm working through my first full year with the budget. So the one we're looking at was developed in the fall, and so we're looking at that, and I'm monitoring this year's budget to make sure that the way we're expending this year's budget aligns with how we've planned for next year. All of that to say, the budget for next year, the 1100 line item, the regular instruction, if you look at that, was reduced by roughly $5,000, it's $4,700. Some of those reductions came from looking at last year's budget, what was expended, and how this year's going. Some of the money that we've reduced from there came from the ROC program, just some extra things that have been in place that PTO has picked up, or we're moving in a different direction that doesn't have as much expense. So some money was reduced from there. The 610 line item specifically, which is, you flip the page, general supplies. That one, there's not a lot to take from. General supplies are developed by departments. They have been operating on a very needs basis, and so there's not a lot of flux with the supplies. Some of the things that are in the 610 lineup, like paper bid list, that is that's sort of district demands, actually.
That paper bid list, Mr. Kinley, what you were referencing earlier about basically centralizing purchasing. We buy all of our paper here, stored here, and then we ship it out to the buildings, and then they all charge for it.
And that's similar to general supplies, so classroom general supplies bid list is the same. And then below that, it's the departments, and there was that overall 610, it increased by $340. Math, social studies and music went up, the others went down, but that's very minimal in the big picture. 640 is books. The middle school, this would be curriculum. There was a reduction in books, and a lot of that is last year we purchased Springboard, which is a curriculum resource for our English language arts. But last year there were more students in the building, and next year, 5th grade coming into 6th grade is lower numbers, so the actual numbers for that resource the cost is lower because there's fewer students that we are projecting to purchase.
So are those consumable supplies?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, so thank you. They're consumables, they're used each year, so the cost of that's been reduced by $3,000, so there was a reduction there. And then the departments had some other reductions. There was STEM studies is one of our EAs that we introduced this year, and so we did add $2,000 for them to be able to purchase science, technology, engineering, math resources. I know there's been a lot of features for JSC's STEM lab, and we're creating some inventory so that our middle school students can continue with some of those programs. But overall, that line, $1,100,640, was reduced by $3,271. The $1,200 is special education. That line has remained the same. One thing I'm doing this year is I've reached out to our special ed teachers. I looked at the budget, the 2018-19 budget that we lived through last year, what was budgeted and what was expended, and the expenses were much lower than budgeted. And so I've gone to the special ed teachers, and we're looking at different curricular items that we can purchase. They've been working off some older ones, so we want to look at updating teacher resources for some of our supplemental students that are maybe operating on a different grade level. So we're looking at what we can do with those funds. So that line has remained the same. And then a lot of special education is dictated. The $2,100 is people, personnel services. There was a bit of a reduction there. Some of our ROC funds are there. One thing I will say is last year, our PTO was very generous, and I'll speak to that. They offset some costs last year. They picked up things that had been in the building budget, and they picked up some of those expenses because they were using the funds they had been bringing in. And it was really kind. They recognized the budget crunch. This year, our fundraising efforts at the middle school have not garnered as much, and so I've left those items in there because I'm not sure if we can depend on PTO, but there's still great student incentives that we want to offer. 2,200 instructional staff is roughly the same. Actually, it was reduced by $600, and I think there was some shifting there. And I didn't put the exact where that $600 came from. $2,250.
Periodic, about
Thank you.
640.
Oh, book order. Yeah, thank you. I'm working off my other sheet, not off what you're looking at. And then 2270. Some of the staff professional development, some of the items, when we speak about ROC, you've approved ROC leaders. This year, the middle school is, we're looking at bringing in new leaders, and until we get those leaders, we're waiting for our new leaders to send to the ROC trainings, the school-wide positive behavior, we call it ROC. We're waiting to get the new leaders in to send them, but those funds are there. One of the things that I want you to be aware of is the IU. We've been working with the IU. We had someone that was spoken about tonight. We have a memorandum of understanding with the IU. We've had some people coming in and work, but they've provided us 4 days of math development. When you look at our building data, math is an area we want to focus on, we need to focus on. We had someone from the IU provide 4 days, but there's a potential for us to send staff members next year, which is going to have a cost, and so that those professional development funds, that's one of the areas we want to look at targeting with those funds.
I will add to that in that a lot of times that money is there because we know what we need, but obviously if we can find a less expensive way to do it, or if we do it through a grant that we're able to get that we haven't got yet, then sometimes, if we don't have to expend those funds in those areas, we don't. And so sometimes you'll see funds left over in those accounts for that reason. The other thing is like, you're gonna see an MOU coming up for the elementary for next year. You don't see it tonight, you'll probably see it the next meeting and then vote on it later in March, is to use title funding, which was done at the middle school last year with Brook Fiber. Is that last year?
And this year with Becky Goodwin.
And we're gonna shift that to the elementary, and it's pricey, it's extremely beneficial, it's pricey, it's about $10,000. That's why we use title funds to do it, so it's not coming out of this budget, it's coming out of title funds that we receive that can only go towards things like professional development. There's certain things, whether it's Title 1, 2, 3, or 4, that can only be used for certain things. And with what we're doing with TDAs, text-dependent analysis, and some of the areas of writing, that's what we're bringing Brooke in for next year. So you're gonna see that on the MOU coming up, which may reduce the money that has to be spent out of some of those building budgets for that kind of professional development, depending on how much we get in title funding.
2300 administration services, that's remained the same. Some of those funds are dues and fees that we have to keep up. Some of those are expenses for Honor Society. Some of the awards come out of that, and things that have just remained. So there's no change there. Some of the conferences this year, 2380, 580 professional conferences expenses. Mr. Armbruster and I have attended PIL courses, which is offered free through the state, and so we haven't gone to any conferences that require funds. So that's a way that's offset that. So, but it's there because there was a conference that was really beneficial, that was great for the direction of the building to go, that I attended. It was a data summit, and so there's years where it's beneficial, there's other years where we can offset that through things that are offered free from the state. This is one of those years, but those funds are still there, and I think all buildings have the same funds. People Health Services, there's a positive of $250. I think that's AED batteries, and that would be consistent throughout the buildings depending on how many they have. But that's the only increase there. And then finally, 3,200 student activities. I will be honest, it has been underspent based off budgeting last year, and I've talked to the music department about that, and they have continued to try to operate on needs-based. Those needs are growing because of that, and so I've had conversations with them. Some of those, the things that they didn't expend last year were instrument repairs, because there was another one, but it's getting to the point, like this year, they had to fix both saxophones because they didn't repair one last year and the other one went, so they had to fix both. So they were really trying to conserve, but this year it's catching up, so they are expending that. What you see in the positive there for 3,200 is it is one item. It's an item that has been on their needs list for years, well before I was in the middle school, and coming in under budget and looking, I added it. It is Musser Chimes. It's something that the music department has really been, they haven't, I would say they've needed it. I don't know if they've used that term because they understand what situation we're in, which is why it's been put off. But this year, they want to implement that part. There are students who would benefit from that instrument, and we haven't had it to offer. And so I felt like it was a worthy cause to go after this year because they've been operating under for quite a while. So that increase there is the Musser chimes, classic chimes. So overall, there's it's just under $2,000 difference from one year to the next. So it ebbs and flows. But that's where the middle school lies with the changes for this coming budget.
Are there any questions?
Yeah, I have a question on the overall totals. And again, we're comparing budget and budget, and I realize the current year versus the 2021 year, we're going down 2,000. And when I go back to 18-19, and we spent 59,000, and we're looking at 92,000 for the 2021 budget. And, you know, I've heard you say a number of times that we were underspent as far as the needs versus, you know, for instance, in 18-19, the budget was 106,000, we only spent 59,000. That's
Drastic?
That's drastic, yes.
Yes.
And I guess I just question the 56% increase from what we actually spent 18-19 versus 2021
Yeah.
that we're asking for. And I know that we're going down through a number of these, and you know, it's just it's easy to say that our budget year is almost identical or a bit less, but you know, if you look at, we operated to the tune of 59,000 2 years ago, now we need.
Yeah. So I'll speak to that from my point of view. The 2018-19 budget was one that I adopted, I walked into. It had some funds for programs that were no longer there. It had staff that had budgeted through the departments. And I went through and I looked at some of these, because what I'm finding this year with the budget that I created and now I'm working out, I'm going to teachers and I'm looking at what was expended up to, what I was using December 31st, so the change of the year, coming back, looking at the change of the semester, what had been budgeted for, what had been expended. So in the middle school, different than the elementary that you heard last time, different than what I had operated off, the department heads developed their department budgets with their staff. And oftentimes there's replacement books in their budgets. So, and in this year, they are looking at, like ELA, for example, is looking at expanding their classroom libraries. There's $6,000 sitting that they haven't spent yet, so I'm going to them and saying, like, that money's there, it's budgeted for, we need to spend it. Because we need those items. We need new classroom libraries, we need literature. But some of them, like social studies, and this is what I found, I looked through the 2018-19 budget, and from books that were budgeted for, but then ELA, for instance, they had coach books in place to the tune of $12,000. When we brought in Brooke Biter and we went with Springboard, we expended $20,000 on Springboard, but the extra $12,000 we didn't need to spend anymore. So because of a change in curriculum resource, it reduced it $12,000. The books, when I look at it, there was a line item for additional supplies in ELA and math. Those two, that's $10,700. My first year in the building, I didn't know the thought of what those additional supplies were. And so I didn't go out and spend it just to spend it, because I didn't know what the plan was. I didn't see that in the budget, and I wasn't hearing the need. So there was another $10,700. Replacement books for different departments. They didn't use them. This year, they're needing them. Social studies, for instance, there's $2,000 in their line item for this year for spending on replacement textbooks, which is similar to other departments as well. Science, their budget is in and out every year because they're consumables, depending on what their labs are. So I saw a lot of areas that my first year in the building, I didn't go out and just spend because I didn't know what the plan was for them. But I also didn't realize, and I'll be honest, this year, like I'm on it, I didn't realize teachers aren't coming to me and saying, hey, we need this, we need this. They're really trying to get by. And I've talked to Mr. Enders about that. If it's in the budget and it's approved and we need it, because like our textbooks are, like I'm gonna use social studies. They had it in the budget last year, they didn't spend it, they should have. I just didn't know that. I know it now. We're spending it because they need those replacements. They're falling apart. So that was something I didn't see last year, my first year. I didn't know how the departments were going to come and request those funds. So that speaks to some of it. I'm also looking at this year's budget that we created and what we're actualizing. And if there's still a big discrepancy, like I will learn from that. But this is my first year seeing both worlds together.
Okay, thank you.
And one thing I didn't mention, 3200s, the student activities, primarily chorus, band and chorus. There was a big discrepancy in that line. They didn't send students to PMEA. They didn't go to as many concerts or county opportunities.
Isn't PMEA the one they have to qualify for?
And
we budget for it.
We budget for it and it didn't qualify. And then some of those, when they go, it depends on how many students are interested or how many students are able. So some of those costs fluctuate. And if we don't, the PMEA has the travel expense, but also the expense of the music. And if we're not going, you lose from both. You don't have to spend either. So that's why 3200s can flux more than other lines.
Any other questions? Pat?
Hello, everybody. Unlike Mr. Velhus, I have a whole district budget here, so my 1110s cover every building. So how I'll do this is you have the summary of 1110. I actually have a briefing.
Technology budget is about $2,000 less from last year's budget. When you start looking at the detail of it, the tech budget and the buildings and grounds budget are laid out different than the buildings themselves budgets, because as Pat's alluding to, he's got the entire district as a whole. So as they're laid out, we laid it out by building. So you'll see Avis's first in their alphabetical order. So high school will be second, and then JSE, then the middle school, and then finally Sal. And then he has a small section that's kind of a district-wide global technology budget. But just wanted to give you kind of a brief overview of the difference of the layout of this budget book section and then the rest of it.
Okay, then so going to the 1110s, they're broken across every school, and there are a lot of commonalities between the items, and I'm just going to talk briefly on a few of them that have changed or significantly changed. The one that I'm relieved stayed the same is our Microsoft agreement. That one would be yes, thank you. It's 1110 650. We just renewed that for another 5 years with a 0 increase in cost, which was amazing. With that comes the incentive for parents and students to actually get the full version of Office. That is a really good extension of a great program that we've had with Microsoft. And that's done through a consortium through IU13.
So you have now added another 5 years at the same cost you presently are.
Correct.
Okay.
And that is actually a pretty huge deal. The other one that don't know where it's going to go is Adobe. We have a site license for that right now, which is ridiculously cheap. What we're hearing now out of IU13 is it's not going to be ridiculously cheap next year. I have no idea what that means. I have no clue as to what the cost increase is going to be in licensing. So if we have to, we will roll back some of the Adobe products that we have throughout the district. So stay tuned on that one. I have a relatively minor increase for that particular item, and that would be in the $650 as well, I believe.
Yes.
Yep, number 2. And you'll see I don't have it too drastic, but I don't know where that's going to go.
So the main thing that comes out of Adobe is what?
Everything. That is every single product we have, and that's what I'm saying. It is ridiculously cheap.
Okay.
Every product that Adobe has in their enterprise suite we have, and we have installed everywhere we possibly can, so students can have it.
Does one level use it more than another, or not necessarily?
That's up to the teacher.
Okay.
It's available.
So are you paying per pupil there, or not?
It's a site license.
Okay.
That's what scares me a little bit, because they're going to change the model. And what I do with some of these, and I know Ben and I sit down and talk about this, when we put this together in October, I'm always nervous because I never know where these price increases are going to go with licensing for software. So Sharon is a very good cohort with bouncing these items off. We go through every year, we go through the licensing. If it's not a site license, we actually go through usage and we'll reduce license counts. And you'll see that some of the licenses in one of the schools, or 2 of the schools, may have gone down but slightly up in another. Overall, it's down because we've actually reduced the usage for licenses based on the usage. Renaissance Learning is one of them. You'll see a $3,000 decrease in $650 at the high school for the elimination of the Hall Pass software. And we do not purchase any more large-scale volume app licensing. So that was a significant drop off of this year. Again, looking at the buildings as separate items, but looking down to the 1110 for additional equipment. And this is always one that the people will be looking at. Item number 4. Yeah, top of page 3. There you will see PC annual lease payments and buyouts. And they are broken down by building. And that particular one actually will be in all the buildings. They would have been the teacher laptops that would have been purchased 5 years ago now, in the 5th year. And they were bought out, and that would be the buyout price, and you'll see that that amount for that particular lease is zeroed out. So,
Hey Pat, a question for you, on the e-Hall Pass, was
Yes.
it just deemed that you guys didn't want to do that anymore, or was it a one-time cost? Or,
it was,
just out of curiosity?
that was based on Stephen and Elizabeth telling us about the usage and whether or not it was effective.
Okay, just out of curiosity, thank you.
Some of the items that you'll see in there from one year to the next that usually stay, things like projectors, and they have become a staple in the classrooms. Pretty much can't live without the projectors in the classrooms. The one item of note is actually going to be a maintenance item, and that is under 756, 1110 756 for the high school. So what I'm trying to do is get into a rotation of, as leases or buyouts occur, to keep the budget where it is now, and to keep things as close to current as possible. I'm trying to get onto some type of a maintenance schedule. And one of the items that we are starting to see many issues with are interactive whiteboards at the high school. Mary, I believe you left. How long did you retire?
7 years.
The Promethean boards, I believe, are probably pushing
Well, they were there when I was there.
13 or 14 years, which we have gotten tremendous use out of those boards. And there's 2 different flavors at the high school, which complicate it even more, but we are having difficulty getting the consumables, the pens. We're paying now, what, $40, $50, $60 a pen, and we're having to get those aftermarket now. We can't get those any longer, and we actually have 2 boards that have died. So I'm trying to keep those on a maintenance schedule so we can phase those boards out, and that if there's a need with the boards we place and take out, they can be used in other buildings to cycle back in until we keep on that schedule.
So for a Promethean board, approximate cost, I see you have 60,000 in there.
Yeah, and here's the issue. We had to do a lot of research on this because we told teachers we were switching to a different board. I would probably not be sitting here because they use the software to run that, and many of the teachers have their lives on those interactive whiteboards. So we're ballparking $1,300, $1,400 a board. And again, they may or may not be purchased over time. No, it's impossible for us to go in and say we're going to swap out 75 boards in a classroom. 65 boards, whatever that comes out to.
And basically for new board members, there's basically one in every classroom, or every spot that there's an educational.
There actually is one in every classroom. The other item of note in 1110, no, that's going to be in 2220. Some of these items I'm not sure if you're aware of. Some of these are almost like security or insurance policies. One is our Turnitin plagiarism checker. The high school would hang me if I took that out. We did have a decrease in cost from our previous learning management system, which was eBackpack, to Schoology. Licensing cost actually was cheaper, and then some of the integrations we did was actually cheaper. So that was a reduction there. And that would be at the high school and the middle school for 11-348. Most of the other items in 11-348, as far as the elementaries, are very similar. Most of them are licensing costs. Major value there. No, there are no new leases to consider for this time around. We do have an expiring lease of 275 desktops, which are directly tied to business ed curriculum and some of the career and tech programs that will be done at the end of June, July of this coming year, a few months from now. And what the plan for that will be is to budget that same amount from, James hasn't gotten back to Mr. Winthrop yet, but it's based on previous history. The buyout should be less than what we are paying now for that lease. So we'll buy out that equipment and have actually residual. There'll be a difference in that amount. So hopefully our next year's budget is actually a little cheaper. And that lease, if you're looking for that, that would be under 756. And that would be That would be 003R. And you'll see that at the high school, 756.
Discussed that here last year.
003R.
Basically cut a lot of them. They were leased.
So that might have been 400, 756.
If you look at what building, it would be, for the high school, that would be line item 6. number 756 for the high school. For 756 for the high school.
We've got 2 4s, it looks like.
We got 2 4s.
Page, page 2 goes into page 3 and they have 5 and 4 again, but that's your Promethean board and your PC at least.
So your page breaks are a little off. Is that what you're saying, Mary?
I'm
The
assuming
numbering.
There's no whatever
It goes
zero.
1 through 5, then it gets back to 4 instead of 6.
Gotcha, okay, yes, that is the 1003R, yes. So that one will be expiring, and then next year, moving that same amount forward, we'll do the buyout, hopefully that will be less than the 36. I think that's budgeted for this year. And again, those are for business ed labs, tied directly to the business curriculum at the high school, and again, most of the other 1110s are very similar, and
As far as within the buildings themselves, under their libraries or 2250s, the function for a library, you'll see Destiny Library Services, that's the library management software that the library is using. Also the site license for the building itself to do movies is out under that too. Outside of that, that pretty much sums up the buildings. Going through the rest of the budget, 2220 is Pat's area. I'm on page 7 now. 2220 is Pat's area of the budget for his department. That's where a lot of the district-wide professional services, web filtering is in there. PaperCut is a software program to manage our copiers. Our key fob system's in there, phone system is in there. That's where all these district-wide professional service agreements are in there. There's also repairs for our fiber optic cable, which we actually had to use this year. And then general computer equipment repairs for him.
2 notables on 2220. Under 348 for the web filtering. This is always a nightmare. 2 years ago, we had to switch because our cost went from $8,000 and it was going to go to $24,000. And yikes. So we had to change, literally found that out over the summer, and we had to change midstream, and it cost more than the amount of money to switch to a different provider. But we went through the IU-17 for consortium pricing, and that was the absolute, we don't know how much this is going to cost for the 5523. The 13140 is what it's going to cost. So that was adjusted. So you look at the previous year, I can't even remember where the usage was the previous year. The scary part was it was going up tremendously. So we did away with that, and now we're year 2 of that new one, and that's where hopefully it stays. Web filtering, they kind of have you, and they know it. But unlike many other pieces of software, you do have alternatives. There aren't too many alternatives for web filtering that don't cause a substantial amount of pain to change.
And this is through the IU?
This one is through the IU, yes. It's consortium pricing. And that also covers our devices that go off campus for the 1-on-1 program. They're also filtered through that as well.
It's through IU-17 or 13?
It's through IU-17. This one's through 17.
Just below the tech budget, you'll see the budget or cost for board docs. Obviously, you should all know what board docs is. There's minor costs for superintendent's office and my office for supplies. The last 2 areas is a pool rental cost. This is for the attachments that we have on poles that are scattered throughout the district. They go out to the old Nipino school, About a year, 2 years ago, we actually costed that out, what it would cost to remove it, and it wasn't feasible to have it removed.
It's actually more money to have it removed.
So we let it sit there, we tried to sell it. We didn't get anybody bid on it either. Do you know anybody wants some wiring, I'll sell it to them for $1. But it's also, it's throughout the district, it's going up to Sal, it's going out to Avis, it's in town. So there's pole rentals, just not, it's throughout the district, not just.
That's for the fiber.
Yes.
Fiber, yes. And then the last piece of the pie there is for our bus boss software, which Dr. Dady, you could cut that, and Dr. Dady his hair may turn grayer. Because that schedules all
That's
the
the
bus
routing
stops.
software and everything, so you don't have to spend however many hours you wanna talk about rerouting every direction. It does it for you based on where stops are.
And this will allow us to eliminate one position years ago, the transportation officer.
Yeah,
I think that happened.
it made that job a lot easier, yes.
Yeah.
Because they used to do it by hand.
Oh, thank you. The only other notable item on there is 756 under 2220, and that is replacement servers. And typically that number has gone down over the last few years with some of the things we've been virtualizing and going to the cloud. The reason why that went up, and we're in a discussion with Mr. Dady and Mr. Enders about this, is the aging of our video equipment. And right now we are not happy with our current provider for what we're paying under some of the license costs. So initially we thought we were going to replace servers, and now we actually may go a different route to get rid of our current vendor altogether and still stay under what we're budgeting. But the server that went up 4,500, that'd be 756. Page 8. And with that, that is the hardware component to it, and then you would have to go up to the 222348, which might be on 7. Because then you tie in the piece that costs $13,900 with that. And in part, some of number 7 on that same item, which is almost another $13,000. And we're not getting very good support from Simplex right now on that. It's almost non-existent. All the work we're doing on our own right now. They have nobody. They have one person in the whole Northeast to cover.
Are there any questions concerning the technology budget?
The iPad leases, the high school, is there another year on that contract?
There's another year on that, yes.
And the junior or the middle school?
Middle school was renewed this past school.
And that's a buyout, right?
That one, yeah, we changed the lease structure for that, so that one will be a lease to own. So when we're done with that one, we own the devices.
In the elementary school now, there's no leases.
We have the iPad minis, which are pushing 7, 8 years old, and they've been paid for out of local money, so they don't need a lease, they were
They're
purchased.
the ones on the cart that they share.
Yes, and they're getting their end of life now. Actually, we're in bar time.
Okay.
Any other questions? When Dr. D grabs the mic, I'll let you know that the next meeting I plan on giving you an update on the current status of the budget. We're making some changes as we're reviewing it. Also, we have retirees that have been approved and are being approved tonight. And then also this week, I will get our certified insurance rates. So I'm hopeful that I will bring you some good news. Plus, the budget also has been updated to reflect the governor's proposal that happened at the beginning of February.
And there's still potential of more retirees.
Yeah, they have until, I believe it's,
First, I think, and then we,
yep, if they want the retirement incentives, they need their letters in by March 1st, before March 1st, I think it is. Yes.
Okay, so I have a question for you, Dr. Dady, only because it's taken me some time to process what I was viewing on your alternative sheet here of choices. And I totally agree with what direction you're proposing and going with the feasibility study in the future. But my question would be, or at least maybe you can help me understand, how it's actually addressing the immediate situation of cutting the $875,000 deficit we have. Go right ahead.
Yeah, this isn't addressing that deficit. This was to help initially basically educate everyone in regards to all the 68 items that, and I think if you count them, I think that's right, 68. All the items that we've done, and if the board wants to look at additional items, they can look at some of the things that were partially complete or still in process, or any of the items in the not completed, deemed infeasible, or voted down. Those would be initial items to look at. If there's other items, obviously this doesn't have to be an all-inclusive list. If there's other, we spent a great deal of time over the past couple of years coming up with this list. There's community input. Some of these came from the community. And if there's other items that we can look at, they obviously could be added to this list as well in regards to what haven't we looked at yet. But part of what would have to be done is, okay, if the green's what we've already done, is there anything remaining in the yellow or the, what do you want to call it? It's supposed to be red, but it looks pink. That we want to continue to look at, whether it's, I mean, you can see that the longest list is what's in the pink there. And are there any of those items that you want to revisit? And some of those items, I think what we would need to do is we would need a feasibility study to look at in a more educated way.
Well, I would agree with you on concerning things like school closure and some of the other options that are on the pink. But I think we all are well aware that we can't do anything immediately to help ourselves to relieve the burden of raising taxes, and that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for this administration to come up with some hardcore alternatives to raising taxes to balance the budget. I mean, this is fine for the future, but it's not addressing the immediate need, which is a few months from now. And that's what I'm asking for. That's what I was hoping to see tonight. So I'm going to ask again for the next meeting. I would like to see, some of these things, when we say they're not feasible, you're talking hundreds of dollars or a few thousand. We're not talking anything substantial. So I'm looking for something substantial savings or substantial cuttings, however you want to view that, in order to balance the budget without having to raise taxes in this community. And that's what I would like to see. Do you think that's a possibility for the next meeting?
When you look at these two lists, and I'm looking at the yellow and the pink, are there things on there that could save you a substantial amount of money? There are some things that will save you a chunk of money, but I don't know that they'd be things that I would look at and go, I'm not going to look at you and go, well, you can't do these things because you can. You can do a lot of those things if you want to, but I think what you have to look at when you look at those things is, what is the ultimate impact of that, and is that worse than taking funds out of the fund balance or raising taxes? And that's what the board's decision is. And so the board's decision to decide, all right, we're willing to make that sacrifice in order to not raise taxes, or we're not willing to make that sacrifice in order to raise taxes, or we're willing to make that part of that sacrifice in order to, and take the rest out of the fund balance. That's the board's decision on that part. I mean, we could look at all of those things and sit here as a board and look at what is how do you want to prioritize these things? I'm sure we'll have a lot of input from administration and probably teachers and things like that in regards to what they think, and that's probably going to be different depending on who you talk to. But I mean, when you look at that pink list and you go, okay, yeah, we could share an assistant principal. We've done that before amongst buildings, and there's quite a few of us here that could talk about how difficult that is, and the difficulties we've ran into in the past, which is why instead of doing that we have Mr. Jean floating between two small buildings rather than sharing an assistant between two large buildings. Can you look at furloughs of teachers? Well, I don't think this year we can. And even if you could, how high are you willing to take your class sizes if you're going to do that in the future? Just like I presented last week or last meeting, there are things we're going to have to do since we didn't close buildings in order to push special ed back, or I should say that offer special ed services back in the two outlying buildings. And depending on how the board decides what direction to go with that, whether we allow parent requests or we don't, is going to have a direct impact on how many additional teachers do we need. And we need to know that soon, because we have to reach out to those families. If we're going to allow parent choice, who's going to choose to go back to those outlying buildings, and who's going to request to stay at Jersey Shore? And are we going to put a cap on it? And if we put a cap on it, then it's going to force some people to go back, because some classrooms will be above the cap as it is, depending on where you set the cap. And that cap is your effort in order to try to balance class sizes without them getting too out of shape. You're never going to balance class size. If your goal is to balance class size, you're not going to do that as close as possible unless all the grade levels are in one building. You just can't. We've tried and tried and tried in the past, and moving kids around all over the place. And the only way to balance it the next year is to either move the same kids again, or to take them from a completely different area and ship them to other buildings. So those are the trade-offs when you talk about, well, I want a cost-cutting measure. They're all here. But are any of them worth what the alternative, are any of them worth not raising taxes or not taking it from the fund balance? Those are the decisions that the board has to make, and all right, what are we willing to sacrifice here? Because you have everything from furloughs to cutting other kinds of positions to closing schools to some of these things you just can't do. You can't eliminate mileage reimbursement because that'd be against the law, I believe. You can't, if you eliminate central supply, we found where that leads to. Printing in the buildings is more expensive than having a print center. You have an Act 93 agreement, which prevents you from making principals 10-month employees, correct? Isn't that right in the Act 93 agreement?
I believe so.
Atomic learning is cheaper than sending a lot of people to conferences. That's one of the ways that we utilize teachers to get hours, and especially trainings that are needed year after year after year. We've already taken Alice training and kind of spread it over, okay, we're going to make them renew every 5 years, so rather than, because for a couple years they all did it together, and now we're going to be putting them in a rotation, so we're not buying as many licenses per year, and everyone will be in rotation to keep it updated. So I'm not sure when I'm looking at this going, what is it which one of these do you want? We'll give you our best cost and which one the board wants to do, but a lot of these have been either voted down or deemed unfeasible, and some of them have partially been done. So which one do you want to cut from, and we'll give you a price.
Well, before we'll be able to know which one we want to recommend cutting, we need to know what they're going to cost. So that would be back on you and Mr. Enders, maybe to bring it back to the next meeting and say, if we do this, it's going to and maybe some of these things that we thought would be cost-cutting measures would cost us more. I mean, we don't know that, but I think it would be, something that you would have to provide us with as a board.
So if you want prices.
Ben's also told us he's going to give us an update on the budget using
Right.
using the information from this. So the budget that we have is very, very raw, so to speak, if that's the word you want to use.
And I think this would be too, but I think
Yeah,
we
so
still.
we might have
need
a
to
whole new outlook
at
when we
least
get
a
the
best
updated
guess
budget.
number.
We can come up with some general numbers of what we believe it could
Just
cost
Go through the last two
with the
columns.
ones that we're allowed to do. Because yeah, you can eliminate ninth grade sports next year. You can whether or not you want to offer incentives, retirement incentives. Those are long-term savings, not short-term. You do those early retirement incentives because you're going to pay out and you're going to get someone hopefully cheaper in, and so you'll see some savings and then you'll see more savings the following year because they won't get top of the scale anymore. So that's not going to be as beneficial for next year. Yeah, you could make all sports programs pay to play, but you have to be very careful with that, and regardless of what you do with the kids that are on free and reduced or kids that can't afford to play, and how do you supplement that thing?
And those are all good arguments to make, but what I think we're asking for is you to quantify those items. And then we can argue about what the costs are, whether they're worth it or not. At some other point. There's no sense going through them all one by one tonight.
Yep.
And actually,
Like I said, just a best guess. I mean, what's your best guess of what the savings would be or what the additional cost would be? If we're doing something that we'd have to change the Act 93 agreement, there might be some costs in order to get them to agree to changing that term in their agreement. Or they may just say no, in which case, that's a done deal. But for us to make a decision, we need to know what those numbers are.
I just had a comment quickly here, but looking at these different cost-cutting measures, some of us have been hashing these around for the last 2 years. We got new members on the board here. I'd like to maybe know if they're coming on with any new ideas that would, other than what these are, anything that they would have new to input into something like this to cut this budget. I'm not putting you on the spot now, but maybe come up with something. You had to maybe have some reasoning to get on here, maybe some ways to cut this deficit somehow. If you could think about it and maybe give us some new ideas, some ways of cutting this deficit other than what we've been hashing out. Just a thought.
I've been looking at other school districts as far as the administrative dollars that we're spending, and I think we're on the high end, comparatively speaking, with the school districts in Lycoming County as well as the IU, which is 18. And I think our benefits are higher. I compared, got on the website with another school district in Lycoming County. Their benefits as a percentage of their salaries is 67%. And our budget projected for 2021 is Jersey Shores is 77%. I looked at another one, 72%, and it so happens that 5% differential would eliminate our $800,000 budget. I mean, 77% is, once I've looked at beyond those two, there's no school district that I've seen yet that's that high. And obviously we know that our retirement is a no-brainer. We can't do anything about that. But I think health insurance is something that really needs looked at. If you look at health insurance and retirement, they're very close as far as the dollars. I think our Act 93 agreement is very benevolent. and that expires, I think, in the next year. I believe that is reworked. As Mr. Switzer has said many times when I sit out there, salaries and benefits, salaries and benefits.
Yep.
And, we know we have a teacher's contract that hasn't been settled yet, so there's a lot of unknowns, but I just think we've got to look at all these, anything relating to salaries and benefits especially. That's where the big bucks are, obviously.
Ben, right now, today, are we in a deficit?
Yes.
We are right now. We don't have any reserve money, we don't have any money that we're gonna pay. There isn't, so we're in a hole right now. We owe people money, we don't have the money to pay.
Oh, well, the question was, are we in a deficit? I took that to
Yeah,
mean,
I meant
are we in
literally now.
are we in a,
Budget,
we are in a budget
Projection,
deficit? I
right?
thought that's what your question was.
projection.
I'm actually working on projections right now. There's a large contingency sitting even in the current year budget for the unsettled contract.
Yes.
So, with that not being settled, that contingency sitting there is not being spent in the current year budget. So, as we sit today, your deficit, I don't believe will be there because of that contingency not being spent. But I know that can't be a guarantee for tomorrow nor next month, because I don't know where that contract will end or settle at. So, but that's a big piece of that pie in this budget, and even bigger in next year's budget. I shared with you before what that contingency line item was in the 2021 budget. It's large for that unsettled contract.
How much is budgeted in as salaries, an increase, how much?
The budget for
Percentage.
the budget for 1920 and the budget for 2021 is 2% instead
2%.
on the unsettled teacher's contract.
Does everybody understand what he's saying? All that money is sitting aside until the contract's resolved.
Which would be suicidal not to set it aside.
Right, absolutely. That's
Yeah,
You have to.
you have to. So we need to get the contract settled.
You control what you can, that's not something right now.
So we know where we're at.
Okay.
We got problems.
No, I don't. Okay, that ends Dr. Davies' presentation. Courtesy floor for comment on agenda items we don't have anybody signed up for. I see somebody who wants to speak. Well, I mean, can we get rid of just both courtesy of the floors at once and just do them both now? Would anybody have any objections to going off our normal agenda and getting that
So
taken
you're
care
doing,
of?
so you're doing the ones on the agenda as well as any
As
other
well as
things?
any others,
That's
yeah.
fine. I'm okay with it.
Okay.
Thank you. Shall we move?
Just for the record, is something about agenda items?
It is an agenda item.
Thank you.
It is. First, I want to thank all you members for stepping up. Some of you are old. Actually, I want to thank Nancy Petrowski first. This is the first time I've heard an IU report since I left in 2013. I appreciate it. Is it okay for me to address people? I'm gonna read real fast. Hopefully I stay tuned. So basically what I've heard tonight is taxes. I'm a little concerned if we're gonna have to go above the Act 1 index again. That's what I'm hearing. The last feasibility study was done in 2000.
Mrs. Helm, just to answer that question quickly, we already voted not to exceed the index.
Okay, all right, well, okay. So the last feasibility study was done in 2010. Most of the people up in front of us were here for that. When we were looking at underutilization of buildings, reduction in student population, we went through selling off wooded property in Avis. We were looking at partnering up with Habitat for Humanity. They pretty much didn't want us. I forget who we sold that property to. Then we went through a school closure hearing. That was Avis. That stalled. At that point, we reevaluated our numbers, the student population. We reevaluated our buildings and spent some time going through 8 plans. Most of us remember those. We finalized with a renovation and addition at Jersey Shore Elementary and a district-wide comprehensive plan that took thousands of hours and volunteer hours from everybody in this community. And it was to benefit 2 people, really a whole bunch of people, students, because we looked at 2 things: safety, something that we were told we weren't supposed to talk about in public. Those of us know what the safety issues are. We know why. Second thing, we wanted accessibility to all of our students. We wanted everything in one location. So if one teacher didn't know how to do it, there was another teacher there to help them. Following that, we went through another school closure hearing, Yipponos. Oh, that was a disaster, huh? I recall, before that, we were partnering up with the Little League. We wanted to make sure the ball fields went back to where they belonged, for like a pass-off, here you go. Because Little League takes care of those fields. They're just on our property because that's where our kids are. 2013, there was a impasse. A bunch of people got knocked off the board, and we've been in a standstill since. In the past 3 years, the district has gone through some more school closure hearings. What feasibility study was used in those presentations? Does anybody know? Was it the 2010 feasibility study? Can I ask you, would you answer that?
The 2010 feasibility study?
What information was used in the last 2 school closure hearings?
2010 was used in a lot of the planning.
But there was an update.
Updated in 2018.
And then updated in 2018.
Okay, so the same information that we already have.
Yes.
Why do we need another feasibility study?
Mrs. Helm,
Is the information going to change?
could you please wrap it up? You're already past your time.
What's the retirement incentives that are being offered to the educators? Could we please know what that is? I really want to thank everybody here because I realize that we're at a crossroads again. I hope you think about our students first. Please. Safety. Please, thank you, every one of you.
Thank you, Mrs. Helm.
Steve Helm,
Also Piatt Township, typically very quiet, and I'll guarantee I'll be much shorter. You know, as I sit here and I listen, and while you think that the residents and the people that live in this community aren't paying attention, they quietly are in the background. And what we hear are the same things year after year after year after year. I see some familiar faces that were on the board when my wife served here. I remember the school closure hearings. I remember all of the tense moments and the time that everybody spent looking at ways to save money. And I think, you know, what has happened is the school closure hearing for Nipponos, while it was a pain in the neck, and it wasn't something anybody really took any pleasure in seeing come, I believe that what we're doing right now is we're kicking the can down the road. Everybody sitting here knows that the savings that you're going to realize come from wages and benefits. They come from doing more with less. It's a hard decision to make. It's not simple. It takes a lot of studies. It takes a lot of information. It requires you to look at your employees and ask them to do just a little bit more. Is there another job that you could take on? Is there something more that you could do in your building that we could maybe, through a retirement, not hire and replace an individual? Because that's wages and benefits. That's where your true savings comes from. And as you sit here and you look at next year's budget, you look at your line items, you look at your buildings and grounds, and I heard the presentation reference the cost for all the buildings. You know, I'll leave you with the thought of where would you be and how much more of a deficit would you be in if you had Nipponos still in your budget? So, you know, kicking the can down the road, looking at Avis Elementary and whether or not it's feasible, or Saladiesburg, and I'm not picking on any school, we love all of our schools. I went to Saladiesburg myself. I graduated from Jersey Shore. I'm from this community. You know, I'm born and raised here, and my roots are all here. My kids went to these schools. But at some point, this board and Dr. Dady or whomever is in his seat, you have a responsibility to those of us and everyone that lives here, including the kids. So, you know, maybe you add an aide to a classroom because the classroom size exceeded what your optimum levels are. You know, somebody to help share the load. Or, you know, there are other ways to save money, but you have to kind of look at, eventually, you're going to have to close the school. Your enrollment numbers are down. We all know it. We all see it. Everybody wants to say it's not there. It's the big elephant in the room. Nobody wants to do it. It's not a favorite thing to do. It's something that has to be done. I challenge you to do that. I challenge you to take that very seriously and look at that. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Jessie Minotti. My family was here a long, long time. I moved back here so my daughter could go to school in this district. Had Mrs. Thompson, and trying to see, that's the only person I had in the school. And I didn't have you as my teacher, I had you in our school, so I'm sure you told me to quiet down. Now, the accountant, you know what, I'm not really, it's like lawyers, accountant, these people scare me. I really liked you and I liked your presentation, and I think it's very admirable saying, I was new, it was my first job, and I didn't know if I should get books or not. But why didn't your boss tell you, we need textbooks? Did anybody else think the same thing? Or is it just me? Now the other thing is, my daughter was in high school in IU 13, and this is why I get emotional. She did Legos for 3 months. 3 months. Did anybody have kids here? Would you be happy if your senior was doing Legos and reading for 3 months? And then another 3 months because she still didn't have a program, because IU 13 brings in money. But we don't have a program or something set up for them. I don't care if the teacher was suspended, fired, or whatever. My daughter was in the classroom. I saw it. I was in there. I called every day. I had emails from the teacher every single day, and I don't blame the teacher, because the teacher was informative. I worked with her. I did stuff at home. I put my daughter in IU 13. If it wasn't for IU 13, my daughter would not be in a veterinarian mentorship right now. I'm sorry, and I'm very sad to say Jersey Shore didn't help me. And sports programs, I played on traveling teams. I did not play for Jersey Shore. Played high school 1 year and I quit because they wouldn't play me. I went to Germany. I was that good, but I wasn't good enough for the Jersey Shore High School. And I sat in a student-teacher conference, and the gym teacher wanted to say that she took credit for starting the girls' soccer team. Hello, I live soccer. I don't ever recall seeing her on the field with me. I apologize, but I didn't see it. So I don't know what this, it's like a delusion. It's a complete delusion. And I think we need technology. I think technology is one of the most important things for the school district because that is the future. But if Jersey Shore is that far behind, we're not going to have that future. If you go to school here and you go to school and your background is technology, what job do you have in Jersey Shore? You going to keep your kids in Jersey Shore? How are you going to keep your kids in Jersey Shore if you don't have the job for it? I don't know. Work at home, maybe? That's not my background. But my background is I did not have the fair education of a public school for my daughter. She's high-functioning autistic. She's literal. So if you say something, she takes you literally. If you say they're no longer here, she thinks you are dead. She's a literal student. She's not stupid. She came to Jersey Shore doing calculus. She went to Legos. Because she's a behavior in a classroom. Because a teacher could not handle her behavior in a classroom. IU13 is free. They'll come to the school, it won't cost the school anything. The OVR programs, if you can't handle
This is
these...
Bonnie, you're past your 3 minutes, so if you can wrap it up.
I think I'm way over past my 3 minutes.
I know.
But I'm just saying, I really think that Mr. Helm is right on the money. And I don't think that the money for special education should be, passed on or held or ransomed. Because that's what it sounds like, it's ransomed. I don't think it's fair to those students. I don't know one student in my daughter's classroom that's successful. They're still at home. My daughter still has the same friends she's had for the past 4 years in the special resources classes, whatever you want to call it anymore. I don't care. That's special education. None of them are working. What's that say about our school? Anyone? Anybody want to jump on that one? Do you want to talk to their parents? Or maybe bring their parents to the next meeting? You can talk to them. They really don't appreciate the children sitting in the basement watching TV, on social media, doing nothing, playing video games. That's where they ended up. Do a career check. Look where these kids are. Oh, the one was in the newspaper. He was arrested. Thank you. Who arrested? Okay, that was the other one.
Carol Holler, Porter Township. You all talk about doing another feasibility study, having a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan. What happened to the last plan when you did the study? What happened? Now you're talking about renovating Avis? Are you kidding me? You know and I know that building needs to be closed. The enrollment is down. Why would you put money into that school when more than likely within the next 3 to 5 years, that building's going to be closed? Why are we doing this? I don't understand. Even South Williamsport is talking about going down to 2 buildings. 2 buildings. Because their enrollment is that low. But their crazy school board is talking about building a whole new stadium for their athletics. And they couldn't even fill a football roster last year. I don't know. I don't understand. I do appreciate all your service. But I'm telling you, when you keep raising taxes, you think, well, you're keeping the students, everybody's happy. When you're hurting the parents, you're hurting the students. When people are losing their homes, you're hurting the students. When they can't afford to buy school clothes, because you want to keep buildings open, you want to keep all these programs, you're hurting the students. It's just something to think about. You think, well, if we cut programs, we're hurting the students. Keep raising taxes like you're you're hurting the students in a different way.
Anyone else? Okay, we'll close courtesy of the floor and move on to personnel. Personnel, we have items A through M. We have a motion to approve A through M.
So,
Second,
Second.
any discussion, questions on any of these items?
I have a question on L&M, and just general, so to speak. We're hiring two full-time special ed paraprofessionals. I know we've lost. Where are we at in that avenue? In hiring these two, does that take care of our aid situation, or we still have more aides to hire?
One of them on here, you'll recognize the name because we just approved her as a
Right.
part-time, a 5-hour. And these are the two that'll go to full-time due to retirement and due to the loss of another paraprofessional for another reason. And so what that leaves is we still have 2 5-hour positions at Jersey Shore Elementary that are unfilled. So we'll have to re-advertise through our Facebook and through the website, because we don't usually do the paper for part-time.
Thank
How
you.
expensive it is. But this does take care of all of our full-time positions for paraprofessionals.
Any other questions on A through M? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Finance. We have 2 bus contracts. Do you have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second. Any questions, concerns, anybody need any explanations?
And this is just to set the price for this year?
No, this is, it's this year's, the way that it works with the state is the bus contractors work off last year's pricing until we get the new CPI and the new updates from the state. And then we set it for this year, and then the difference is made up between like now and the end of the year. Sometimes they owe us money, so how much we've been giving them reduces, and sometimes
So
we
this
owe them money.
this is just setting the prices, but we actually have contract with the busing companies going this year.
Yes.
We're in a 5-year cycle with them, or do you remember, Ben? When's it?
I don't have to look at that. I believe it is a 5-year cycle.
Yeah, I think we're a couple years already into it though.
Right, but this isn't the last year, this is just
No.
setting the price, okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
And just to be clear to the public, we don't set prices, state dictates these to us, correct?
Yeah, what these 2 companies have always done for us is they work strictly on what the state formula is. They don't ask for more than that. They've always worked just on the state funding contract. And and you'll notice the numbers of days are different. And that's just because, like the one that's 18 days, that was probably without looking, I can almost tell you what each one of these are. That is a run that had to be made for a particular situation. Sometimes it's a homeless situation that we have to make a special run for, because we're required to by law. The one that's 197, you're probably looking at that going, well, wait a minute, school's only our kids only actually attend school 175 days. That is actually a bus that services like BSI, our school, as well as St. John Newman. So what can happen there is like BSI, they they hardly ever close, so they have like 2 days off for Christmas rather than all the days that we have off. They only have like 1 or 2 days off for Thanksgiving. And so, because they're a treatment center, they attend a lot more days than we do. The one that's like 187, that's just a situation where some schools might be open when we're not, that we have to transport kids to.
Any other questions on the A and B? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Miscellaneous, we have 2 donations to consider for approval. A donation of 12 test trucks from the STEM grant that was described to us in our last meeting, and a donation of 97 books to the Jersey Elementary Library from Mark and Angela Walden. We have a motion to approve.
So moved.
I'll second.
Thank you. Any, again, these were presented at our last meeting. Anybody have any additional questions or concerns?
I have a question. I tried to listen to this at the last meeting, but I couldn't get the vocal very well, the audio. A, could you explain to me quickly, briefly, what A is? 12 HES trucks, are they those little toy trucks?
Yes.
They are?
That's exactly what they are. But they have like physics, technology,
The
science
STEM grant is
activities.
funded by HES, and that's part of what they provide for us, is the trucks.
I vaguely heard something about trailering, hydraulics, CDL licenses. Was that part of it, or?
The
Not.
the kits that they use have demonstrations on hydraulics and things like that, but it's not part of the trucks themselves. They have little science kits and erector sets and that kind of thing that they use.
Is this gonna be part of somebody's curriculum then, like a 9 weeks course, or how will it be incorporated into this curriculum somehow?
It'll be part of the STEM lab that's at the schools, where the teachers can sign them out like library issues. Like if the teacher wants to do a science segment or something on hydraulic, they can sign these out of the STEM lab.
It's also part of what Katie Work, who is the district librarian, as well as many other things for us. She does a lot of things in the STEAM lab as well.
Okay.
Any other question on those 2 items? Okay, hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. And that's all for tonight's agenda item. The board will go into executive session for personnel and legal, and we will conduct no additional business when we return.